Eddie Jackson is the most dangerous defensive back in football. I think that much we can all agree on by now. But I think it's about time that we also start considering him as maybe the most dangerous defensive player, period. And I know that might sound crazy to some people, but just hear me out on this. Despite sharing the field with a bunch of bona fide studs like Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, and Kyle Fuller, when I watched all 11 game tapes of the Bears defense this week, it was Jackson that caught my eye in game after game, and it was Jackson coming through in the clutch to deliver the Bears some of their most important wins of the year. He has been not just game-changing for Chicago this season, but downright game-breaking, which is even more than I of all people expected from him this early in his career. And keep in mind that I had Jackson as a top 12 draft pick in my 2017 mock draft, which everybody thought I was out of my damn mind for doing at the time. But even by those first round pick standards, he is still exceeding all of my insanely high expectations. That being said, however, when we talk about Defensive Player of the Year awards, draft value isn't really the main thing we consider, it's value to the team on the field. So if we're really going to go make a case for Jackson being the most dangerous defender in the league, we have to first go through all of the things that Jackson does in this Bears system, and why that system would likely cease to function without him on the field. For starters, when you look at defenses that play a lot of single high safety looks like cover 1 or cover 3, the most important component of those coverages, which makes them all work, is having a free safety with a lot of range. Jackson is super explosive and has fantastic long speed, and what that speed translates to on the field is range in coverage. We'll take a look at this interception against the Cardinals as an example, because it's probably one of the best examples of his range that you'll see all season long. This is how the Bears version of Cover 3 works and why it's so effective. The corners are leveraging themselves slightly outside of the receivers here so that they can really jam them up if they want to run something like a go route or a deep comeback on an outside release. And if those receivers do want to run any kind of deep route where they have to get downfield as quickly as possible, that leverage forces them to release inside and away from the corner's alignment where they are more towards the inside edge of the numbers rather than the boundary. And that inside release on those routes, of course, puts them in range of the free safety, which is Eddie Jackson. So Eddie is responsible for helping on any route that gets funneled inside his range from numbers to numbers, while the corners are mostly responsible for stopping anything on the boundaries outside of the numbers. Rather than breaking it down like a third split in those zones, think of their coverage zones as really more of a quarter in the deep area of the field in terms of the overall ranges that they each have to cover. On this play, Bradford wants to take a shot here on 3rd and 9, and JJ Nelson, who runs a 4.28 40, is the matchup he wants against Prince Amukamara. And keep in mind that this route will be run in a certain way based on how Prince is lined up, so that affects how Bradford will throw it and how Jackson will then close on that throw. Because of that outside leverage from Amukamara, Nelson's only choice for a clean release is to release inside towards the interior edge of the numbers. From there, he then has to stem outside to push Prince towards the other edge of the numbers to back him off and kind of create some horizontal space, and then accelerate upfield and stem the route slightly back inside again into that seam area for Bradford to hit. Inside, outside, inside. It's not a double move per se, it's just how receivers are coached to manipulate their route stems against this particular defensive alignment so that they can create a better window for their quarterback. Now, meanwhile, Sam is looking towards Eddie during his drop back to try to freeze him in place in the middle of the field with his eyes, and then once he hits that last step in his drop, he's looking for Nelson down the field. The stem in Nelson's route, by the way, has successfully pushed Prince slightly outside by this point, so Bradford is thinking here that he's got a window to work with that he can try to drop that ball into. However, little did Bradford know that no matter where he placed this ball, whether he put it inside into the seam or outside and further up the field, this window never really existed in the first place because Eddie Jackson is the free safety on this defense. Every possible adjustment that Nelson could have made here still fell within Jackson's range no matter what, because that range is what the system is built around. There was no universe in which this ball could be completed. Eddie got from the dead center of the field to just outside the numbers by the time the pass reached Nelson, so he didn't even have to lay out for the ball. It was an easy pick by his standards. This right here is the problem that the Bears defense creates with their cover 3, and it's the exact same problem that the Legion of Boom created just a few short years ago. You cannot leave the ball inside on a double stem to the seam because Eddie will get it. And you cannot throw that ball deep down the boundary either because their outside corners are playing those routes aggressively anyway and they will get it. The only way you can reliably throw deep on them is to clear people out of the way with route combinations, make insane jump ball throws to big body receivers on the sideline, or just hope that they make a mistake in communication, but for the most part they are not making mistakes. And if those DBs are not making mistakes, that means your quarterback is just sitting there in the pocket waiting for a route that will never come open, while Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks are breathing down his neck. It's literally the same formula that Seattle used to build one of the greatest defenses of all time not too long ago, and now we're seeing it once again in Chicago, all because of Eddie Jackson. And speaking of the Legion of Boom, by the way, I think some special attention should be paid to how Jackson's presence affects the corners around him, just like Earl Thomas's presence affected the corners around him, namely Richard Sherman. Just like Sherman was allowed to freelance and bait out interceptions and play a super aggressive style out in space because he always knew that Earl had his back, Kyle Fuller is doing the same thing for the Bears because he knows that Eddie has his back. Take Fuller's interception against the Dolphins in Week 6 as an example. It's 3rd and 7, and both of these boundary corners are again in outside leverage. They don't care if your receivers take inside releases, they don't care if you try to run anything in breaking at all to exploit their alignment, because they know that the safeties will cover their asses and they have license to break aggressively on anything they want to. As Albert Wilson breaks down on this out route here, Fuller is jumping it with zero hesitation. He's not looking at the quarterback, he doesn't know if this is a pump and go double move, he doesn't know if they're just trying to bait him into giving up a ton of separation, and he just flat out doesn't care. If Wilson is running a double move, and if Osweiler is just trying to fool Fuller with a pump fake, it does not matter because Eddie Jackson has his eyes in the backfield the entire time, and he's already on the near hash ready to tag in. If Wilson turned upfield, by the time the ball even got to him down the sideline, Jackson would have been all over it because that throw would be well within his range. And on the other side is the same story. Prince Amukamara just gave his receiver the inside stem for free right down the numbers, and if Osweiler tried anything deep over there or over the middle, well, we've already seen that Jackson can pick off that kind of throw from that exact same spot anyway. So the moral of the story here is that Kyle Fuller had no hesitation to drive on this throw because he knew what kind of safety he had behind him. He knew he could take a chance that this was not a double move, and it paid off huge with an interception and return. I'll say it once more, this is Seattle all over again. When you have an elite safety, it changes how your corners play their assignments and it makes them better players. Kyle Fuller, Prince Amukamara, and Bryce Callahan are all having the best years of their respective careers, and it's not a coincidence that the one thing linking all of them together is Eddie Jackson covering them as their free safety. He is that kind of presence. But all that being said, I think what impresses me the most about Jackson on the field is not just how his athleticism allows the corners around him to be more comfortable making plays, but how his instincts and situational awareness help him to make plays all on his own. It's not very often that you see a second-year safety understand route concepts like a 10-year veteran, but when you watch Jackson on tape, he looks like he's reading quarterbacks as easily as he would read a children's book. It just looks simple to him. Some of the reads he makes are really, really impressive. Like when he's identifying rub concepts before the snap just based on the stacked alignment of the receivers, and knowing exactly where that rub is going to go on 3rd and 6, and knowing the exact angle to take to undercut it while staring down the quarterback, and having just enough speed to get a finger on the ball and disrupt its flight path, just enough to make the receiver drop it. It's those kind of plays that when you look at it the first time you say, cool, great read, he got a hand on it and broke it up, good job. But then you realize that there's maybe only 3 other safeties in the game that could get a hand on that ball. And you say, okay, that's special, and yet he just made it look routine. How does he make that kind of play look routine? And then you realize again that it's because big plays and closing on receivers at crazy angles is routine for him. His level of normal is not normal. Take that pick 6 against the Lions that we all just saw on Thanksgiving as an example. That was a perfect play to show how Jackson can flip a seemingly normal check down into something truly extraordinary. I'll set the scene again for those of you who did not see that interception live because it was so much more than just a pick 6. It's a tie ball game late in the 4th quarter. The Bears are on the road on less than 4 days of rest after a super physical Sunday night game against the Vikings. They're playing without their starting quarterback, and they are in desperate need of one more stop to try to give their team a chance to win the game. Matthew Stafford has 6 minutes to work with and only 59 yards standing between him and a potential game-winning score. This is 1st and 10 at the beginning of a fresh drive. Chicago is trying to fool Stafford here by showing cover 2 man before the snap, or possibly cover 2 zone, but really it's actually a cover 1 pressure with Roquan Smith blitzing. And Vic Fangio is calling this pressure to try to load up the protection, give all of their pass rushers one-on-ones across the board, and try to force that ball out quickly. Detroit's offensive line is sliding towards the blitz, so Smith is picked up, but what we should really pay attention to is what happens with the tight end here, who would have been Smith's man in coverage had he not blitzed. More often than not, when a linebacker is blitzing, a safety will cheat down and take that linebacker's man in coverage as a replacement, which is what happens here with Jackson sliding down to take Michael Roberts in the flat. Believe it or not, this is actually a pretty routine first down play here from both sides so far. Chicago is blitzing to force an early throw and limit the time that Stafford has for a shot down the field. Roberts recognizes the pressure from Roquan and runs a quick flat route to give his quarterback an outlet. Jackson is 9 or 10 yards off before the snap, so there's theoretically too much space for him to get there in time. And usually on these quick flat routes against pressure, you can get somewhere between 3 and 5 yards on that little dump off to punish the blitz and get your drive started. Hell, sometimes if that tight end breaks the first tackle, maybe you can even get a lot more than that. Again, this is all fairly normal and you'll see it every week no matter what teams you're watching, but what is not normal here is Eddie Jackson. It doesn't matter that he's 10 yards off before the snap. It doesn't matter that Matthew Stafford is getting this ball out right on the third step in his drop and that he has a whip for an arm. Eddie is so explosive and so instinctive that as soon as he reads Roberts going to the flat to give Stafford an outlet, that ball is his. This guy is so fast and so smart that even on the most routine plays in the game, he can rob you f***ing blind. That's why he's a game changer. That's why he's a game breaker. And that's why he's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. No pass is safe and no play is routine. If you test him, you have to be perfect or he will score on you. It is that simple. Just a few days earlier in that aforementioned Vikings game, he did the exact same thing. Fourth quarter, 1 possession ball game against a division rival in primetime. Chicago's in a cover 2 zone here, and in a cover 2, his responsibilities are not that different from the responsibilities he would have in a cover 4, in that the primary job he has is keying in on the release of this number 2 receiver in the slot, which is Laquan Treadwell, because Treadwell is the most likely threat to be working either the middle of the field or in the boundary on an outbreaking route. Cover 2 is notoriously vulnerable both in the middle of the field and on the intermediate boundary, so again, Treadwell is the main threat here for Jackson to take away. Think of the main difference between a cover 2 and a cover 4 being that in a cover 2, both flats are taken care of so the defense is less vulnerable to the run game and to yards after catch of course, whereas in cover 4, both deep boundaries are taken care of so it's less vulnerable to the vertical passing game. But anyway, we're getting sidetracked here, so I'm going to move it along. The key point I want to talk about with Jackson on this interception is situational awareness. The Vikings are down 8 points and we're almost halfway through the fourth quarter. They need to move the ball and preserve clock just in case this drive stalls out, which means they're going to have to be working the boundaries as much as they can. At the same time, Minnesota is starting this drive on the right hash. Kirk Cousins' arm is fine, but it's not spectacular. So if Minnesota is going to be calling any deep outbreaking routes to work those boundaries, and of course exploit that cover 2, they're probably going to be calling them to the short side of the field from that hash to make it an easier throw, and that is Jackson's side of the field. So based on the score, the time left in the game, the spot of the ball, and the alignment, Eddie is just thinking boundary, boundary, boundary this whole time. After the snap, you can see that off the motion, the Vikings are running a flat corner route combination to that boundary side, just like we would expect them to. And trust me, that is not a bad play call for the situation most of the time. That concept is a cover 2 killer after all, and it's working the side of the field that Cousins is comfortable with. The only thing you can really fault John DeFilippo for in calling this play is that a normal cover 2 killer isn't really a killer against an abnormal safety. All Jackson needs to do now to confirm that his suspicions were correct is just watch Kirk's eyes. He's not really playing the route, he's just keeping Treadwell in his peripheral vision while keying on the quarterback because he just wants to make sure that Kirk is looking where he expects him to look so that he can then jump the route that he expects Treadwell to run. And as Jackson thought, Cousins is reading that route combination the whole time and progressing through it based on his read of the hang corner, just like any other quarterback would do against cover 2. He knows that Minnesota wants to work the boundary in this situation. He knows that on the short side of the field, they are far more likely to call those outbreaking routes. So as soon as he sees Cousins look at Fuller to read that flat corner combo, he's breaking on it. He's sprinting out of the blocks before Treadwell even takes one step outside, and once again, that ball is his. Even though this pass to Treadwell probably would not have been completed anyway no matter what because Cousins overshot his target, Eddie was still there to pick it off in a position that most safeties would not get to, and he likely still would have picked this ball off even if it was thrown accurately. Most safeties would be behind Treadwell, or at the very least right on his back hip, but not Jackson. He got to that spot before the receiver because of his situational awareness, his pre-snap instincts, and of course his fantastic explosiveness and ball skills. I'll say it again, he is taking routine offensive play calls that are usually pretty easy completions and turning them into defensive touchdowns, and he's winning games by doing it. If these season-changing plays are not Defensive Player of the Year kinds of moments, then I don't know what are. And honestly, if Aaron Donald and Khalil Mack were not in the league right now doing the exact same thing as pass rushers, then I don't think there would even be a discussion for the award this year. That's how good Jackson has been. This is the most dangerous defensive back in football and arguably the most impactful defensive player at any position. He has won games for this team. He has transformed an entire system and made it into a direct reflection of one of the greatest defenses we've seen in the last 2 decades. He makes everyone around him better, and that includes another Defensive Player of the Year candidate that lines up only a few yards away. Tell me what the difference is between what Eddie Jackson has done for this defense in 2018 compared to what Troy Polamalu did in 2010, or what Bob Sanders did in 2007, or what Ed Reed did in 2004. Am I really to believe that a second-year, 4th-round draft pick cannot win one of the league's highest honors just because of what position he plays or how many people know his name? A game breaker is a game breaker, no matter what role he fills or who his more well-known competition is. So how about this? I'll make you all a deal, since I can absolutely see the arguments for all sides of the Donald versus Mack versus Jackson debate. On Sunday, December 9th, the Rams will travel to cold, windy Chicago for a knockdown, drag-out brawl in primetime. The whole country will get to watch arguably the 3 most dominant defenders in the league outduel each other for the spotlight. So let's all decide here and now that whoever makes the biggest plays, whoever has the most impact on that game to possibly decide playoff seeding in the NFC, wins the award. What's more fair than that? They're all going to be on the same field together, so we might as well compare them and settle the debate once and for all. Beast versus freak versus monster. May the most dangerous man win. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. Bears fans, you guys have been begging me for this one for a long time, so I'm happy I could finally get around to it 12 or 13 weeks into the year. It's been a long time coming. But most importantly, I'm happy that Eddie Jackson justified my super duper high grade of him before that 2017 draft, because I caught a lot of heat for that. There was a ton of people that really did not like that pick when I put him in the first round, so I feel a little bit vindicated now. Takes a little bit of the sting out of me missing horribly on literally that entire quarterback class, but hey, at least I got an all-pro safety out of it, so it's not all bad. And while I'm at it, I also want to see if I can get all you Bears fans that are watching to help thank our sponsor for making this video possible, because I don't really get to rely on ad revenue from these shows. I've mentioned this before, because of the footage that is used and how the algorithm works and all that. So sponsorships and Patreon pretty much pay all my bills. So if you're looking to help me pay my bills while also dipping your toes into the waters of sports betting, perhaps even betting on that crucial Rams-Bears matchup coming up in a few weeks, check out MyBookie at the link in the description below. Enter promo code Brett. You can get up to a 50% deposit bonus on your initial deposit, which is essentially just giving you free extra money to bet with exclusively on the site. And any bets you win with these free promo code bonuses, you do get to keep as if they're just normal bets. It's just money. So really it is just free bets on games, and that's a great deal. So if you were thinking about throwing some money down on these late season matchups, or of course any of the playoff games or Super Bowl prop bets or anything like that, check out that offer in the link in the description below. Enter promo code Brett on sign up and deposit, and go have some fun. As for me, I'll be in Atlanta this weekend. If you guys are going out to the Falcons-Ravens game, that's where I'm going to be at. I'm going to see Lamar Jackson live for the first time ever, so feel free to stop by Section 209 if you're there at the game. And if you guys know any good tailgate spots at the stadium, hit me up with those in the comments, because I'm always down to get some really good parking lot barbecue. But yeah, that'll wrap it up for today. I'll be back soon with more stuff, potentially on Lamar Jackson, actually, since I'm going to go see him live. But we'll see next week. So until then, later.